Okay, this is how to convert a Craftsman LT1000 with the stock front gas tank to a rear gas tank. This mainly applies if you did an engine swap and you put a Briggs opposed twin or a Kohler opposed twin or any large series of engine in the tractor and it's interfering with the stock gas tank. If you were to put a Briggs V-twin in here, you could keep your front gas tank. It would be a little bit tight, but definitely would not be as tight with the opposed twin. Like mentioned, this is a Craftsman LT1000 newer generation. It does have the second gen steering, but it has a few first generation parts on it. I think this machine was put together from a few different machines to make a one complete machine, which isn't a huge deal. I think it's a newer chassis. You got a little bit of an older steering wheel. This is the last generation steering wheel. The seat's definitely an older seat, and a few other things were changed on here. But anyways, there's a couple different ways of doing this. You can completely strip down the machine, or you can do it the little bit harder way, but the little bit easier way, which I think I'm going to go with that method. I don't really want to take the rear fender off. To get the rear fender off, there's a bolt here on the right underneath the floor pan, and a bolt on the left, same spot. You take them off. You take these two bolts out of these two bolts out of here that hold the spring on, and then also you got to remove the bolts at the bottom of the dash to it gives a little bit more room to maneuver the rear fender off. And then you take that off. Then there's a cross brace right here that holds the rear fender and it also holds the gas tank in place. So you got to take all that off and you can get access. Personally, I've done this multiple different times and I want to do quick because this is a quick flip machine. I'm going to actually just take out these, right here and here. I may or may not loosen or take out the front ones, the one on the right, the one on the left. We'll see. If I need a little bit extra room, I will. Then take out, like I said, take out that bracket, 4 bolts, 2 on each side, takes that off. There is a ground wire on the right hand side at the back here that operates your seat safety. The machine will not start and run without that ground wire in place. It will die as soon as you put off on the clutch. So you gotta make sure you do put that ground wire back in place. Also, you gotta take your ground wire from the back and relocate it up to a good ground source at the front. You're positive, take it off at the back, take it off at the solenoid, and get yourself a short positive cable, or just wrap that one around. It does not matter. But at the front, obviously, if you have fuel in the machine, drain your fuel. These 2 bolt holes right here and here, that's what holds your new battery tray in place. So your new battery tray will bolt right into place without any issues. They all have these hole setups. So if you see these holes at the front of your machine and it's just below your gas tank, you can do the rear conversion. But like I mentioned in the previous video, there's a couple different ways of doing it. Not all of them can have this particular tank put in. If you have the older style with the smaller rear fenders, this tank will not work. You'll have to replace your rear fenders and go with a fender fill gas tank, not an under the seat fill gas tank. So there's a couple different ways you got to do it. You got to make sure you have the right parts. You got to make sure you have the right machines to actually do this conversion. I've done other videos on how to do this conversion before, but this is a refresh video on how to do it. So anyways, get all that taken off and I'll show you the next step. Okay, my mistake. There's only 1 bolt on each side and it has this little hook that actually goes through another hole in the top of the frame. But you take that bracket out, make sure you remember the way it's orientated. It does matter for where these holes here line up with these holes right here. Also, with the rear tank models, they normally have a bit of a cushioning under here. So you want to figure out a way of putting some cushioning in there. An old rag, I've actually used a liner out of boots, cut them down and put it on under here. Just add some cushioning for the top of the gas tank. For this particular one, I'm going to either see if I have any boot liners kicking around, or I'm going to take a couple rags and fold them up tight under here, or straight across. Just add some cushioning to the top of the tank. Also, if you're doing it the way I'm doing it, it's a good idea to put in a little guide bolt right there. That's just in front of where the bracket goes, just so you know where the bracket is, and you know that you put it right back in the correct spot for everything to line up correctly. I did end up releasing my front bolts on the right and left, just to make the fender move around a little bit easier. But be careful you don't put too much weight down on here. It's solid, but they're not the thickest steel in the back here. So just be careful and be mindful of what you're doing. So the next step is to take out your power wire. So this goes all the way up to your solenoid. This wire will not be needed. If you don't have a short wire, you can reuse it, just wrap it around or put new ends on it. I should have a short one somewhere, so I'm going to be looking for one shortly. But get this taken out. Then you can also start putting you can actually put your tank back in, your new tank in, get your fuel line ran. On this particular setup, the fuel line is actually going to run down the left side frame rail and come up right in this area right here. Once I get the tank out, I will show you where my fuel line is going to come through, or I'm going to end up doing it so I can get the back end back together, and I will show where the fuel line is coming up. As you can see, I have not started draining my fuel yet. I'm going to do that next as soon as I get my tank in place. Normally you need about 3 to 4 feet of fuel line. More is better. Unfortunately, Canadian Tire, Crappy Tire did not have fuel line in bulk, so I had to use what I have sitting around. I should have enough length. I did measure it out yesterday. But on this particular machine, the fuel lines are on the right-hand side. I will be changing that to the left-hand side just to make it a little bit easier to hook up to the new setup through the fuel filter. Okay, I got the rear tank in place now. It is definitely easier to take off the rear fender, but like I said, I did it the hard way. So it's in place now. I'm in the process of draining the fuel tank. We get ready to pull it out. The fuel line's already ran as well. It's much easier to run the fuel line before you put the tank in place, for obvious reasons, especially if you're using clamps. So it's all done, and make sure you do use a clamp on the back, so you do not want that vibrating loose. Unfortunately, I didn't have any thicker material, so actually I folded up a rag, and I used that around the corners right here, and across the top. It came out a little bit right here when I was putting in this bolt. It's not a big deal. You just really don't want this tank to move a lot. See, it has a little bit of give to it, which is fine. You just don't want it bouncing around in there. And it's a plastic tank. It's not really going to bounce around and hit anything and break it. But you just want it to be nice and secure and have a little bit of cushioning around it. Like I said, if this was a proper rear tank machine, it would have had foam isolators on there. But the way I did this, it will work out perfectly fine. So next step is get the front tank out and start with the wiring. One kind of important thing I did forget to mention when it comes to the wiring, you do need this plug right here to connect into your stock harness. And here is your barrel connector to go to your solenoid. That's just a piece so it doesn't chafe. But anyways, you do need this type of connector right here. Whatever wire you use, you gotta make sure you reconnect this wire. On this end here, I just have a car type terminal, which will end up coming off. Okay, I made a little bit more progress. I'm just about done doing this conversion. All I really have left to do is put the battery tray in, put the battery back in, and put a ground wire in. I have my new positive right here. I had to put a little bit of electrical tape right here. It had a small gash on it. I got it hooked up to the solenoid. This is my main power feed going to the harness. That's all done. It's all covered over, so I finished putting that cap over. Fortunately, the fuel line is running right here, right above a lot of the wiring, but there shouldn't be any issues as long as the fuel line doesn't get cut. It's away from anything sharp, so I don't see there being any issues. You tuck it this way a bit. Unfortunately, with the length of the line, I didn't have any other choice but to run it in that fashion. So I will go underneath, and before I put the battery tray in, I will put some zip ties on there. Make sure everything is tucked out of the way as best as I can. You can even zip tie that to the to the steering shaft, because the steering shaft just moves around in circles, so it really does not matter. But or I could even put it to the other side of the steering shaft. I originally had it that way, and then I switched it back, so I might end up switching it back around, putting it to the other side, and it's a little bit farther away from a lot of the electrical. So there's no fuel in the tank yet, but there's fuel in the carburetor, so once I put fuel in the tank, this thing should fire right up. So just a couple more things left to do, and I should be done. Okay, the conversion is now finished. As you can see, the battery is up front where the batteries belong. Let's see if it fires up. I have not turned the key yet. Clutch is set, seat is on temporarily. That seat will be coming back off very soon to get replaced. Let's see what happens. Okay, the rear tank conversion is complete. I want to see if it will fire up, and hopefully I can drive it out of here. I had a few issues bringing it in here, but I should be able to drive it out now. Just needs to let it warm up for a couple minutes, and it normally comes back and starts working perfectly fine. But no issues really. I put a couple zip ties on the fuel line, got all that taken care of. The battery went in without any issues. The positive is hooked up fine. I gotta get a bungee cord to go possibly from here and around to the back of the battery tray, just to help hold the battery in a little bit better. It's always a good idea. I still gotta change out that seat. I have a proper Craftsman seat for it. It's in a little bit rough condition, but I'm going to put it on here anyways. And then I'm put some more gas in this thing, and I might go take it for a good ride. I haven't really done that with this machine yet. It's been way too cold. I kind of want to get the hydro nice and hot and make sure it's all working properly. I did run it around the backyard quite a bit and doing figure eights, and it did do fairly well. So I want to run it down to the end of the street in front of my house and back, and maybe around another street and see what happens. Make sure I don't have to push it back home. By then the hydro should be nice and hot and we should be good. I'm also going to put the deck back on as well. So I'm not going to film that. So this is just basically the rear tank conversion. Like I said, it's not very hard to do. As long as you have all the parts handy to do it, you won't have any issues doing it either. Like I said, it's a good conversion to do. The battery does belong, in my opinion, under the hood. The tank belongs under the seat. So I'll talk to them later. Please keep redneck like always, and please subscribe and comment.